The Bo Show today at DNVR or Denver Broncos OTAs, because Bo Nix was not one, not two, but the third string quarterback. Today was Zach Wilson's time to shine. And did he shine? Or was it still the Bo Show? We're going to break it down on the DNVR Broncos podcast, coming to you from the DNVR Bar. We've got Henry Chisholm, Zach Stevens. We just raced over from Broncos OTA practice, the final week of OTAs before mandatory minicamp starts next week. Henry, what's going on?
I don't know. I mean,
all right,
we've just been driving for like 40 minutes.
Was it the Bo Show?
I got the tweet up. Early on, yes. Early on, 7-on-7s, he looked great. He looked the best of any quarterback out there, at least in terms of that portion, which was the first portion where they were actually playing football and not just going through individual drills. Let's see. Let me pull up these notes.
I'll tell you what. Here,
okay.
When you pull up those notes, today, Bo Nix he's kind of just continued to do what he's been doing these first 2 weeks, and that is continuing to just look like a veteran out there. Is he blowing anyone out of the water? No, he's not. Is he making the highlight flashy plays? No, he's not. Is that who Bo Nix is? No, not really. Like, that's what Caleb Williams does. He's the one that does the crazy plays and runs in circles and, holds on to the ball for 10 seconds before throwing the ball. What Bo Nix does is he's the one that makes good decisions, quick decisions, gets the ball out of his hands quick, and does not turn the ball over. 3 interceptions his last year at Oregon, and that's what we continue to see. And Henry, it's just, I continue to be very encouraged by it, because sometimes players, especially ones that throw 45 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, and their offense is questioned if they can translate that to the NFL. Sometimes those players come in and the game's just way too fast. That's not what we continue to see. So another really steady day from Bo Nix. But Henry, there was one shakeup today. The first 2 weeks, we saw Bo Nix running with the number ones. Just happens to be that we're there on Thursdays. Bo Nix's day when he runs with the starters is on Thursday. Zach Wilson's day is on Wednesday. And Jarrett Stidham's day is on Tuesday. Well, the Broncos have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday practices this week. So Jarrett got his day with the ones yesterday. The day number 2 was Zach Wilson getting the first day, or the starting reps with the starters. And then tomorrow will be Bo Nix's day. So today we got to see a little shakeup and see Zach Wilson in there. Bo Nix has looked good with the ones. Did Zach Wilson look good with the ones?
No, he had a bad day. I said last week that in the first 2 practices we saw, he was the worst quarterback that they put out there. But I threw in that I'm not going to make any big judgments because we'd only see him with the 3s. And with the way these practices have gone so far, the 1s and the 2s are switching so much. Like, there's only 4 guys maybe on offense, and I think 4 on defense who aren't rotating. And so really the 1s and the 2s are about the same. It's when you drop down to the 3s that there's a big difference. So I didn't want to hold that against him. Today we saw him with the 1s, and it was really rough. There were 2 throws, I guess, in particular that stand out to me. One of them is not like the biggest deal, but it was just a swing route to Javonte.
Is that the very first pass?
It might have been, where he hit him in the feet.
Yep.
And it was incomplete.
I think that was the very first pass.
And you look at that and you're just like, I've seen this on tape too many times. And it felt like last year he had fixed that a little bit. He was hitting guys in the chest on those. But that's been one of the issues since he got into the league, is that he just can't hit those short swing passes, as crazy as that sounds. And to see that again hurts. But then the bad one was team drills. There's pressure. So I was downfield. I heard it was a jump pass. definitely off the back foot, and he just lobbed it over the middle to, I think it was Lil Jordan on a crossing route. It might not have been Lil Jordan, but it's just a shallow crossing route.
Doesn't matter who it was. There was literally 7 defensive guys.
So there was I think it was man coverage. There was somebody on him, and then PJ just swooped in and picked it off. And it was an easy interception. Looked nice, like jumped in, cut it off, all that. But PJ Locke picked that one off, and it was just like this horrible decision. Like, you never just lob one up over the middle of the field, because this isn't even like red zone drills or anything like that. It's just a fourth down. It's just bad.
This is OTAs, as we found out from Sean, is part of the equation. What Sean said they're really doing during OTAs right now is setting guys up for the competitions in training camp. Essentially, you can't win a job when you're competing for a starting job in OTAs. But Henry, I think you can lose it.
Interesting.
And I think that pass, along with everything we've seen, might have just lost Zach Wilson the opportunity at that starting job. I mean, we touched on it the very first week. It was like, man, Jarrett and Bo were kind of 1 and 2. And then Zach was like the obvious 3 there, or 1A and 1B. Last week, the exact same thing. You would have put Jarrett at 1A, Bo at 1B, and then you would have had Zach Wilson at number 3. I think a third week in a row, he's the clear number 3 quarterback in a different situation where he's running with the starters. Henry, everything about that play that you described was something that starting NFL quarterbacks cannot do. You can't be throwing jump. So what happened? The ball was snapped, pressure in his face. And by the way, a lot of pressure, not just on Zach, but a lot of quarterbacks today. And we'll talk about how Bo and Jarrett handled the pressure today. But so a lot of pressure in his face. I like that he wants to not take the sack and throw the ball away. But the options are find a completion, throw the ball away, take a sack, throw an interception. Throw an interception is the very last thing you can do there, even in a practice situation. So a lot of pressure there. He's like going off his back foot, jumps. So a jump pass off his back foot, falling back, actually like kind of running backwards. And it was literally a 500 ball. You know, in 500, when there's like 7 people just standing in a circle and it's whoever can kind of jump the highest. The only issue, 500 balls are never good. Jump balls are good. That means it's like 1 defender, 1 offensive guy. But 500 balls means there's a group of people around. And this was like 5, I kid you not, 5 white jerseys, maybe 1 orange jersey, which is the offensive color. And PJ, easy interception, catches it. Everything about that cannot happen. And unfortunately, that's kind of a play that you see from rookies make, and you're like, whoa. Sean takes them, and they're looking at the film after, and Sean's like, you can never do that again. Zach Wilson started 33 games in the NFL, and unfortunately, we've seen too many decisions like this. It is, it's very concerning. You just can't have that. If you're going to get confused at the line of scrimmage, because Zach Wilson, just like Bo Nix, is learning this entire system right away. If you get confused at the line of scrimmage, you throw an out when it's supposed to be an in. Okay, those things are going to happen, but you'd probably like the rookie to have those mistakes, not a veteran in the NFL. But you could give Zach Wilson a little bit of a pass there because he's learning this system for the first time. But something like that just cannot happen. Now, it would be one thing if we had seen a good week 1, week 2, and a solid week 3 outside of this one mistake. But just the fact that he's been the worst in week 1, worst in week 2, and then you top it off with this in week 3, it's not encouraging for him going into mandatory minicamp next week.
Yeah, it's definitely not encouraging. I definitely also don't think he's lost the job just because those decisions aren't being made yet. So
do you think he can still be the starting quarterback?
Oh, yeah. Like, there's a world in which it happens. I mean, I'd be shocked. I think that they're coming into this, there was a 95% chance it was Bo Nix. So, I mean, you're starting from like a terrible point anyway. But yeah, I mean, there's a world in which Bo Nix and Jarrett Stidham struggle in training camp and Zach Wilson plays well. Like, I wouldn't bet on it, but I don't think it's over.
There's nothing I've seen to show that, though.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, there's a chance they re-sign Ben DiNucci and he's the starting quarterback. Like, there's a chance because it's not impossible.
But those decisions just aren't made yet. I think when it comes to this situation, to me, Zach Wilson basically is a rookie. I think, if anything, the Jets made him worse. I know there's some things that you can look at in the numbers where things look better, but you watch him play and they took away everything that he was good at and tried to make him do the things he wasn't good at, and that obviously didn't work. They really did break him. Like he didn't become a veteran with them. He is still just as much of a project as he was when he was drafted. But yeah, I mean, like he never really, I don't think, had a chance to win this job. I think that he's still in that same boat where it's going to take a crazy upset. But to me, I mean, OTAs, especially for quarterbacks, it's just time to learn. You're just trying to teach everybody what to do and like what the plays are, those sorts of things. And the real competition really is in training camp. So I don't think that all of a sudden they're just going to take him out of it. But I think Zach Wilson being the starting quarterback is every bit of as much of a long shot as it sounded like it would be when you first found out that he was going to be a Bronco, you know?
I actually, especially with what Sean said after practice, talking about how OTAs is to set up the competitions heading into training camp.
We've talked about that.
I think that if next week is, because we get to watch all 3 days of mandatory minicamp next week. If those 3 days look similar to the 3 practices we've watched in OTAs and Zach Wilson looks the same, I think it has set up the competition where he is eliminated going into training camp. He's obviously still on the team. He's competing for a roster spot then, but I think the competition that this offseason would have set up is that it's Jarrett Stidham and Bo Nix. And Henry, honestly, that's what it's boiling down to. At least what we've seen so far, it's those two. And once again, today, let's kind of transition to those guys. Jarrett Stidham and Bo Nix, it's another day. Another day where you could just tell me, oh yeah, number 8 is actually Bo Nix, number 10 is Jarrett Stidham. And I would believe you because those guys look nearly identical in what they're doing, how they're operating the offense, and then at the exact same time, how they're performing for the most part. They are like the exact same person right now. And I'm going to sound like a broken record. I said it after the first practice. I said after the second practice. I'm going to say it again today because it was true again today. That is such a compliment to Bo Nix. The fact that he looks like a 4 or 5 year veteran, a guy that's been in this system 1 year already. He looks comfortable. He didn't have, we'll get into exactly like what he did today in terms of the good passes, the bad passes, but he did not come close to making any bad decisions. It's not like he lit the world on fire, but I would say that all 3 quarterbacks, this was more of a defensive day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this is, I think, by far the worst the quarterbacks have looked as a whole. I mean, Zach Wilson had the worst throw of camp, which is a good starting point for having the worst day. And I think like Bo Nix, Jarrett Stidham, there was almost nothing that you look at and say like, wow, good play. Like there were no wow plays from anybody. I think the only like wow segment was Bo Nix in 7-on-7s because he was just so sharp. Again, it's I think he hit a slant, like there was a quick out. Like it's not like he's pushing the ball downfield or doing anything crazy. But it's just how quickly the ball comes out, it goes to the right spot, and they were scripted. So I mean, like the same plays are being run with the 1s and the 2s and the 3s. So you can see how the timing just is a little bit different with everybody. I thought that 7-on-7 period from Bo Nix was as good maybe as any quarterback has had in a single period. Although it's tough because there are a couple, like Jarrett Stidham hits a couple deep balls, and so how do you really compare that in previous practices, to be clear? But outside of that, it really was pretty gross for everybody. I mean, they didn't hit the ball or hit the ground, but they hit a bunch of checkdowns and did that sort of thing.
Well, Henry, let's talk about that 7-on-7 period and then talk about Bo and Jarrett and their days specifically, because I do think there's value in what went on in that 7-on-7 period, despite it not being a team period there. But I got to give a shout out to our friends over at Vestibule. You know who was talking about Vestibule today, Henry?
Sean Payton?
Sean Payton was talking about Vestibule because he was talking about Baron Browning, who is the athlete rocking and rolling with Vestibule right now. And one of the things that Sean said, he said, oh, I know that company. You don't have to quiz me on that company. I know what they're about. And he said, I like that Baron's betting on himself with this. And if you want to bet on Baron's career and the future earnings he's going to make, you can buy his IPO. It's live right now over at Vestibule. Download the app in order to see the shares, the IPO, and buy them, where you can get in on Baron Browning. And what you do is you buy essentially a stake of Baron Browning's future career earnings, and he's on the final year of his deal. This is the perfect kind of player to get in on. A guy that, Henry, do you think Baron Browning's going to be the starter? I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Okay.
We
There we
have
go.
some
There we
evidence
go.
for that,
Okay.
too. I think he's going to be the starter. Does he play a valuable position?
Yes.
He does, and he's making like $3 million this year. He could have a big time jump in his future career earnings after this season. We're seeing pass rushers get paid $20-25 million a year. If he breaks out, he is going to have a monster contract waiting for him from the Broncos or on the free agent market. So go to the Vestibule app store. You can also download it by scanning the QR code on our screen, and you can buy Baron Browning's IPO. Like I said, it's live right now. Shares are available for purchase, but they're limited. So download the app over at Vestibule and or the QR code on the screen.
And check out Bet365 too. I've been having fun. They keep running this baseball promo where I think it depends on who you are. They offer different amount. Oh, maybe not for this one. This one, if you bet $50 or more on a 3-leg baseball parlay, you get $25 in bonus bets. And if you don't want to bet that much, you can bet $20 and get $10 in bonus bets. But they've run this a few times the last couple of weeks, and I've made a bunch of money off of it. Especially,
I love that.
Oh yeah, no, it's awesome. They've got other stuff going as well. I think anytime if you're betting on a team to win a baseball game, anytime that team goes up by 5, they pay out your money. So even if they blow that lead, you still get it. And if they just go up by 5, at least you get it early too, which helps. They've got boosts for all the different things going on. There's a 50% boost for any bet on the Memorial Golf Tournament. So much cool stuff happening at Bet365. Right now, if you sign up and use the code DNVR365, you can deposit $10. You get to choose between either a bet and get offer, where you place a bet of $5 or more, you get $150 in bonus bets, or a first bet safety net offer, where you can place a bet up to $2,000. And if your qualifying bet loses, you receive a matched refund in bonus bets. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older, physically located in Colorado. Please gamble responsibly. If you or somebody you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER.
Henry, we know that Sean Payton, especially in 7-on-7s, and just to reset, 7-on-7 means no defense or no offensive lineman, no defensive lineman on the field, so it's just skill position players. This is a period meant only for passing, and it's meant for the offense to win. And we know that Sean Payton is used to the offense winning in 7-on-7s. He's made it clear to us that in 7-on-7s, really no balls should be hitting the ground. When he was with Drew Brees, no balls were hitting the ground during 7-on-7s. During Zach Wilson's 7-on-7, it was that low pass to Javonte Williams to start it, which was an incompletion. Javonte Williams really had no business catching it, and he wasn't able to. There was another incompletion, which is actually a great pass breakup by Damari Mathis there. So credit to Damari there. And then he did complete his final 2 passes of that period. Jarrett Stidham comes in. He completes a pass, short pass, but he still completed it. The next one was also complete this time to Troy Franklin. I really like the way that Stidham worked through the progressions on that one. Then the next one,
so sure.
He probably was sacked on it. He really just floated to the left, floated to the left, floated to the left, and then threw an incompletion, just an overthrow. And then the next play, he had a nice touchdown pass with great footwork by Michael Bandy to bring in the touchdown. Then you have Bo Nix. So you have incompletions, at least one incompletion from both those other quarterbacks. And Bo comes in. He's got a nice short completion to Javonte Williams over the middle of the field. Then a short, quick pass completion to another running back. Why can't I think of his name right now? Why is it Blake Watson? Then this might be my favorite throw. Actually, the next two are probably my favorite throws on the day, regardless if it was 7-on-7 or not. Bo Nix has a touchdown pass to Michael Bandy, and it was Michael Bandy was working the right slot, right over the numbers. They're like 5, 6, 7 yards out or something. Michael Bandy does a quick hook right at the end zone, right at the line of scrimmage, and there's a defender just draped all over him. Do you have who it was?
Tremon.
It was Tremon Smith all over him. And so Bo Nix puts it, especially in that area where it's tight, where there's a lot of people around, puts it down low where Michael Bandy is only able to catch it. That's probably actually worked into the route where the ball is going to be placed low, because Bandy knew exactly where it was going to be. Bo put it only where he was going to get it, out of harm's way of everything else. And Bandy caught it for a touchdown. I absolutely love that. And then the final play of this was still about 6, 7 yards out of the end zone. It was a really quick play. You had Troy Franklin go on and out for, I think he was in the slot out, or maybe he was outside out, but makes a quick out excellent coverage. This one was Traymon on him too as well. And Traymon got a lot of love from his coaches for being in such good coverage. But so Traymon draped all over Troy Franklin, and Bo absolutely zips this one in. Troy Franklin does a good job getting both feet in. He catches it about 1 yard short of the end zone, but I mean, an absolutely perfect pass with a lot of zip. Now, we're not allowed to say what we hear on the practice field, but what I can tell you that I do think I'm allowed to say is defensive players were impressed with how much zip that ball had.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you show it. You have to remember, like, arm strength is not deep balls. Arm strength is getting the ball to the sideline, and that's one of I wouldn't say a concern with Bo, but when you go into the bigger picture of, like, what does Bo do that nobody else in the NFL does? He doesn't really have a trait like that, and that's what you see from the guys who are at the very top of the league. But he certainly doesn't have a weak arm. I think that's important to remember, is that he's middle of the pack in terms of arm strength at least, and you just like to see the accuracy stick with it when you go to the fastball, because that one, I mean, it was just placed perfectly. Like, that had to be right here. It was a tough catch. I was a little surprised he was able to hold on. But yeah. Other thing, we'll get into the Traymon stuff later.
So it was, and you're absolutely right about Bo Nix's arm strength, which when you see Zach Wilson throw a pass, pretty much any single pass Zach Wilson throws outside of the jump pass interception that he had today, it's like, oh, damn, that has zip, that has force, that's going to cut through wind. You don't notice that. You didn't notice it with Peyton Manning.
The cut through wind is interesting.
It's not something. Yeah, exactly. We'll get to that in a second. It's not something that you have to be a good quarterback, but that's just something like the eye test. You're like, whoa, Zach has that on every single pass. With Bo, it's only when you need it, really. And when you need it in the red zone, it's nice to see that he actually has it, because there are some quarterbacks that aren't able to do that. I love Trevor Siemian. He wasn't able to do that when he absolutely needed to. The fact that Bo is able to turn to that, and then also he knows when to use it and when not to use it. He knows when to have the touch and when he doesn't need to use the touch. So I thought it was a great point that you brought up, Henry, and just wanted to go off of that. Okay, so now let's go on to what else happened through the rest of the team periods when it was the actual team. And Henry, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but whether it was Zach Wilson, Jarrett Stidham, or Bo Nix, there was so much pressure with these guys. And we already kind of said it. Zach Wilson didn't handle the pressure the best, made that really bad decision. I thought Jarrett Stidham and Bo Nix, it seems like they're being coached to handle pressure in a certain way. Specifically, if there's pressure right there, obviously you step up, you move around, buy time if you can. But if not, one of the things they were doing today, both Jarrett Stidham and Bo Nix, was if there was a deep receiver, just kind of throw it over their head, have an overthrow. If somehow Marvin Mims is able to run under it and you didn't think he was going to, then it can be a catch. If not, it's just an incompletion. You live to see another down.
Yeah, there was a lot of pressure. And it started right away. I mean, you mentioned Zach Wilson. He did have the one to Marvin, and that one Damari is running stride for stride with him. I would have been curious. I wish that ball would have just been on target, because it would have been a good battle down there, because there was like a little half step of separation. But for the most part, like, Damari's hanging right there. I would have loved to see who would have won that. But then just a couple plays later, PJ Locke sacks.
Just to be complete.
Yeah, incomplete.
Just an overthrow.
Yes, big overthrow. PJ Locke blitzed. Tyler Beatty missed the blitz pickup, and then that was just another sack.
You talking about Bo or Jared?
That was Zach. All Zach Wilson.
Zach.
Yep. Just in that first little drill that they had.
Yep.
But I mean, there was also a lot of running in this drill. It was a 50-50 split, which means when we're talking quarterbacks, there aren't quite as many passes to cover, but the defensive line looked good again. They tried like this trap, and Zach Allen beat McGlinchey on it with the plus they had like the actual trap block, the puller, and Baron Browning beat him, and all of a sudden you just have a run stuff. And so these first few plays, it was pretty ugly.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, I'm looking at my notes here, whether it's Zach, Jarrett Stidham, Bo Nix on the field, nearly every other play, if not even more, is a sack.
Oh, yeah.
And then on the ones where it's not a sack, it's a throwaway, intentionally deep. And I am curious to see if this continues or if this is something Sean Payton's kind of coaching in a way to avoid sacks. Because what was the one thing, the very first thing that Sean Payton pointed to when asked at the owners' meetings, Henry, how to make this offense score more points?
I would guess no sacks.
That's exactly
There
what he
we
said.
go.
He said
Yes.
no sacks, so that's a huge point of emphasis. And I think we already saw it today, so I'm curious to see if this trend of just throw the ball to a receiver downfield, overthrow it so it's not in harm's way, we're not throwing interceptions, but we're also not taking sacks, if that continues. I mean, I have a throwaway from Bo, 2 out of 3 plays in the first team period, and in fact, man, was he close to one of these. I think it was a throwaway. I'm not quite sure. He threw a bomb to 87 down the right sideline.
Yeah.
And there was about a yard of separation, and he just wasn't able to get there. It like grazed his fingertips. I don't put it as a drop. They say if you touch it, you should catch it. But I mean, it was like the most grazing of great. Maybe he should have laid out for it, but I don't blame him there. But that's pretty much what we saw, just left and right, was just deep bombs, which seemed like intentional overthrows from Stiddy and from Bo.
Yeah, and like you said, there was that blitz around the edge on that one. I was over and over. There was one of them that I had Nick Benito sacked Jarrett Stidham, and it was a weird protection. Basically, they pulled a guard in protection. And tried to do that. But we talked about this last year. I mean, he had, was it 2 sacks? I think it was 2 sacks against the Bears. Did he have 3 sacks? I almost thought he had 3 sacks in that game. It might have been 2.5.
Yeah.
But it was that same thing where he's just too fast for that protection where you try to pull somebody to pick him up on the edge. And, you know, I remember talking to him after that game and being like, yeah, it kind of sucks. Nobody's going to be trying to block you like that anymore. He's like, yeah, that's what the coaches were saying. Like, gonna have to find some new thing. But they gave him one of those opportunities in practice, and he turned it into a sack because you can't do that against him because he's too fast.
100%. I was really, really impressed with Nick Benito. And, you know, he's a guy that he's flashed in games, like you said, but he's also like a practice stud because he has that speed to get around the edge and good awareness at the line of scrimmage to find those holes, like you were saying, when there's a puller to get in there. He absolutely blew that up. He had some really good practices last year, and he does look bigger, which is something that he did need to add to his game, and I don't think it's impacted his quickness. Just to be more of an all-around guy. Right now, I think it's going to be Baron Browning and Jonathan Cooper as the starting outside linebackers, but if Nick can continue to do what he's doing in practice, if he can do that in games, and he is going to earn himself more playing time. And Henry, let's continue to talk about the quarterbacks, but then also get into some other guys. You brought up Nick Benito. I know there's other guys that you want to give some love to as well. Plus, we have a big update on Courtland Sutton, but first I have a trivia question for you.
Okay.
What happened more recently?
Okay.
Last week's hailstorm
So that was last week.
Last week's hailstorm brought the most hail damage in Colorado to the Denver area since this year, since X year, or so was that more recent, or did the Broncos have a double-digit sack leader more recently, or a double-digit sacker?
I would say definitely double-digit sack.
By 1 year.
Only one.
Von Miller and Bradley Chubb in 2018 each had double-digit sacks. Before last week, last week was the most damaging hailstorm in Denver since 2017, which is good news because Broncos Country loves double-digit sacks by a Bronco.
Yeah.
And they don't like damaging hailstorms. But if you were impacted by those hailstorms last week in the Denver metro area, you got to give our friends over at Red Hawk Roofing a call because they are here to help you. Give them a call at 720-771-8921. And over at Red Hawk Roofing, they have free in-depth photo reports for all inspections. Hail season is here, and that means they are going to give you a free upgrade to hail impact resistant shingles. They've also got decades of experience. Quality materials. They're Colorado's best estimators and contractors, and free no obligation roof and property inspections. Plus, They are big DNVR supporters, so you can trust them. We put our stamp of approval on them. So make sure to give them a call at 720-771-8921 and tell them the DNVR sent you, or check them out at redhawkroofing.com, or give them a call 720-771-8921 and tell them DNVR sent you.
Also, check out Toyotas. There's a bunch of Toyotas all around. I bet if you're on the road and you just get to look around, you'll see a Toyota everywhere, and you'll probably like what you see. They're perfect for Colorado because they are, meant for the outdoors. Yeah. You can drive up mountains, you can drive in the rain and the snow and all those sorts of things. And that's why we think you should go see your Front Range Toyota dealers. You can go pick up the all-new 2024 Tacoma. There's the return of the iconic 2024 Land Cruiser. They've got 17 different models that have all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the 4Runner. So much cool stuff. So visit your Front Range Toyota store at a location near you. There's AutoNation Toyota, Arapahoe, and Centennial, Corwin Toyota in Boulder, Groove Toyota in Littleton, Mountain States Toyota in Denver, Stevenson Toyota East in Aurora, and Stevenson Toyota West in Lakewood. Toyota, the official automotive partner of the NFL and the official vehicle of DNVR.
A lot of people rocking and rolling with us, which we really appreciate. Yes. And if you are, make sure to hit us with a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. It's free, and it really helps us, helps join this community. Make sure to join the Toyota chat as well. We love hearing from you guys. Mm-hmm. It's a much nicer chat this week than it was after last week's practice. Henry, you were getting burned in last week's chat. Instead of getting burned in the chat, you got burned on the field today, and the people are pointing it out. Do you need some sunscreen, Henry?
No, I've got a bunch in my
bag. We can hook you up with some.
I've got a bunch. It's just like that 2 hours after practice, we're just standing there.
It's true.
Because you get to the end and nothing's bad, but that happens. But yeah, no, people at practice were coming up to me and be like, wow, I saw what the chat was saying in that podcast. I was like, bro, I know. It was crazy.
That's a nice little flex, though. Nice little flex for your burned muscles.
It is?
Yeah. And you're wearing the athlete shirts, and people have noticed that as well today.
Yeah, I confused some people out at practice.
Somebody said, quote unquote, athlete.
I am an athlete, and people at practice were starting to take pictures of me saying, like, what? I thought you were one of the players.
Wow, another flex for his burned muscles. People taking pictures.
Oh, yeah. People thought Henry I was one of the players.
I think they were taking pictures and calling security. This guy's out here.
Okay, let's get back to football.
Okay, tell me, but what stuck out to you outside of the quarterbacks?
Oh, let's see. We'll start with some of the little things. Like you brought up Tremon, great coverage on that low ball. There was like basically the goal line that Michael Bandy brought in, who we'll get back to. There was a very similar play, and it was the low ball to Brandon Johnson when Zach Wilson was the quarterback in 7-on-7s when Damari Mathis came inside and broke it up. And I like just seeing those little combinations where it's the exact same spot, the ball's in the same place, they're breaking from the same side. And just to see like Damari makes the play and Tremon, despite being in perfect coverage, doesn't make the play. Sometimes you just like notice those little separators, and it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, 100%. One more thing on the quarterbacks that we talked about, that we hinted at. There was one pass that Bo threw where it looked like maybe he was just doing one of those throwaways, like just throw it over a receiver's head, and it really got caught in the wind. Because you talked about getting how all of Zach Wilson's passes cut through the wind. This one got hung up in the wind, and actually I think it would have been probably completed. Might have been the throw of the day, but it really got caught up in the wind. Yeah,
well, and the reason I think it would have been completed is because it was to David Sills, who's made a bunch of those plays on the sideline.
Yeah.
He's made a bunch of tough catches, and there's no reason to think that wouldn't have been another. I think it was a big day for him, and like I said, big day for Bandy. Or I guess maybe not big day. It's been a good camp for David Sills. I think Michael Bandy, though, with the 2 touchdowns, the low one on the goal line.
7-on-7.
Yeah, the one across the back of the end zone.
Yep.
Those were the only 2 touchdowns of the day. Unless you count Troy Franklin's. I didn't think he got in.
I think he was a yard short.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah.
I was a ways away, but I thought he was short.
Yep, he was.
So yeah, I think we've talked a little bit in the past, not recently, I guess, but more so in the offseason, talking about who they could add. The Broncos don't have a true slot receiver. They've got like some big slots. There's like the Marvin Mims like speed slot type thing, but they don't have a true slot receiver. And so far through these 3 practices we've seen, Michael Bandy looks good. And I didn't have time because we were so late getting here. I haven't been able to go back and look. I'm pretty sure he didn't dress for a game last year. But I'm pretty sure he got some catches with the Chargers that would have been the year before.
Yeah.
So I mean, he has made teams before, so he isn't just like totally forgettable. It's going to be an uphill battle, of course, because you got basically 5 guys locked in, and then you get to the little Jordan Humphrey, Jalen Virgil, Brandon Johnson, and then there's that another tier gap probably before you look at David Sills and Michael Bandy. But hey, I think this is a time of year, like Sean said, where you're trying to position yourselves for the competition. And I think that Michael Bandy has done a good job of that. I think that he's at least going to get an opportunity in training camp.
A small, shifty slot receiver that wears number 83. Who does that remind you of?
Michael Bandy. Just kidding. Wes Welker.
Wes Welker. There you go. I mean,
yes.
It's wild when you see him out there. Obviously, he's nowhere close to Wes Welker right now, but there is so much value in that position. And you're right. He is the guy. And who do those 2 touchdowns come from?
Both were Bo.
No.
One was Bo.
One was Bo.
One was Bo. Oh.
One was
I thought they were one guy.
So, like, he's
yeah,
working with both of these guys, getting chemistry with both of these guys.
Yes.
I think that's important, that both of them, like, didn't come with who we think is third string, with Zach Wilson. They both came with the 2 guys that are at the top of that competition. So, 100% Michael Bandy deserves some recognition. Henry, we had a little fight today out at practice. I was only able to see one person who was involved. Lucas Kroll was involved, and then Quinn Meinerz came over and pretty much like picked him up to carry him away from it. Did you happen to see who was on the other end?
No, we were late trying to figure it out. But yeah, I mean that's what we got too.
Yep. So you typically don't see, and this was like a very little scuffle. Like it got broken up right away. When Quinn Meinerz comes over and picks you up and pretty much carries you out of it, the fight's over because Quinn's the biggest guy on the team. And I like that Quinn stepped in, but typically you don't see fights happen until training camp and typically until week 2 or 3 of training camp. So tension's already up a little bit. I kind of like it. We're going to see if anything breaks out next week. But Lucas Kroll getting in the action after, really putting his name out there the past few weeks.
Yeah. I mean, really that first practice, he looked really good. And this is kind of the first time he's done anything since. And it's not really what you want to know.
Last week, we talked about him because he dropped a couple of passes. So, up, down, and then he's skirmishing a little bit.
Yeah.
One other thing, Henry, that I want that really just jumped out to me today. Jaleel McLaughlin is so freaking fast.
First play just gets to the edge.
Oh, man. And I've noticed it all 3 weeks of OTAs. He is just so fast. He's shifty. He's explosive. This is a guy where I think he has shown enough last year and this year where Sean Payton is going to trust him to be the Alvin Kamara role. Now, is he going to be Alvin Kamara? Who knows? I'm not putting those expectations on him, but Sean talked about that Joker role so much last year, leading up to the season, during the season. He's talked about it this offseason. That Joker role is so important for him and his offense. And with Greg Dulcich being hurt, the Joker role is pretty much a big-time receiving threat from either the tight end position or the running back position.
Hopefully
is
both.
How Sean looks at it. Yes, hopefully both. Sean wants it so bad, but with Greg Dulcich hurt, and Jaleel was it a little bit last year, but I think because he was a rookie and a young rookie, an undrafted guy, they didn't fully trust him enough to give him that opportunity. I think Jaleel is on the doorstep of taking that step where Sean actually trusts him to give him the full-time Joker role, which would be huge for this offense. It would be huge for Bo Nix if he ends up being the starting quarterback, and it would be huge for Sean Payton.
Yeah, definitely. We're talking running backs tomorrow, right? Was that the plan?
We are. Yeah,
so we don't have to dig
projections.
too deep into some of this, but I had a bunch of thoughts about that.
We might.
Okay, cool. But just a couple things. I mean, Samaje was top 3 in receiving yards for running backs last year, which when you think about all the receiving back, I think he might have been number 2 behind Christian McCaffrey, but the internet's not working great, so I can't get the exact stat. I know he was number 2 in terms of efficiency when targeted. So you have the volume and the efficiency as a receiving back. That's going to be pretty tough to beat out, I think. For anybody, especially when you have a rookie quarterback, you want to give him the easy outlet, and Samaje has proven he can do that. Now, Jaleel obviously has a very different skill set than Samaje does, more run after the catch, but he still needs to work on that feel for zone and getting open, like making sure that he's open every play. And the big thing is pass protection. And one of the thoughts that I had today, was watching Michael Burton in shotgun in some of these drills, and I saw the video was tweeted, so we can say that was happening. But could Michael Burton do, or how much of what Samaje does could Michael Burton handle? And when you talk about like these running backs and how there's 5 on the team, and you're going to need to get that probably down to 4 or 3.
Yep.
Samaje saves you the most money. I wouldn't like getting rid of him for the reasons I've said. He's been very productive and has a very clear role. But could Burton pass protect well enough that he could split that role with Jaleel or Blake Watson, who is a more natural receiver than Jaleel is? It's just a thought that crossed my mind.
100%. What's crazy that, like you said, he was the third. He had the third most receiving yards of a running back in the entire NFL last year. Right now, I think Samaje's on the outside looking in. And
you think so?
That it's very much just like if I had to set it right now, I view that very different than I do the Zach Wilson as a quarterback. I don't think Zach Wilson can be the starting quarterback for the Broncos. I absolutely think that Samaje can still make this team. There's a lot of time left with that one. But if I were to set it right now, it's him and Blake Watson competing for that final running back spot, in my opinion, right now. And it is going to have to be Sean Payton getting creative with using Michael Burton in that sort of role.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because I don't know what they do because some of the skill sets are a little bit redundant, and we should probably save a bunch of this for tomorrow. But you think receiving backs, you think Samaje and Blake Watson, and then Jaleel probably gets in there like a half step below just because he hasn't proven it quite as much. When you think of power backs, you think of Estime and then Javonte, and then you have like Samaje in there too, but he's not really like an I form back. They haven't used him in that way. We think of the speed backs, you got Jaleel and Watson, and so you just like look through all these different combinations and try to figure out how you want to piece it together over the course of the season. And as horrible as it is to say, there's a good chance that this decision is kind of made for them just because of how often injuries happen. We'll knock on wood when we say that, but odds are you're not going to get to the end of training camp with all 5 of them healthy. Like, that just, you hope it happens, but this could turn into be more of a non-issue than it feels like right now.
Speaking of health, Henry, let's talk about guys that were playing, weren't playing, and then weren't there. And let's start with the guys that weren't playing. Pat Surtain, for the most part, spent time on the side field. After practice, Sean Payton said he's healthy. So nothing to worry about with Pat Surtain in Sean Payton's eyes. I've also done some research behind the scenes. Nothing to worry about with Pat. The Broncos have a wide open cornerback spot. They're giving a lot of reps to Damari Mathis, a lot of reps to Riley Moss, who was back today, a lot of reps to Jaquan in the slot as well. So those 3 guys getting tons of reps. I did not see Levi Wallace out at practice today, though.
I didn't see him
That's
either.
Kind of an interesting one. Also, guys on the side field, meaning that they weren't practicing, but they were at practice, maybe doing some light stretching and work. Brandon Jones, that's a new one that popped up. I don't think we found out about him today, did we?
No.
Greg Dulcich, we obviously know his situation. There was some hope from Mike Kliss over the weekend saying that Dulcich might be back before the end of the offseason program. He was not back today, although he was on the side field. DTY popped up over there too. He was out there, so not encouraging for him, especially with he's in a very intense battle to make the roster right now. Caden Stearns also not practicing right now.
Still
he's on the side
him.
field. And Reese Taylor were all on the side field as well. So some secondary, which has kind of opened an opportunity for J.L. Skinner, number 34 this year. And Sean Payton has been really impressed with him really since the middle of last year. Said middle of last year he was really good on scout team, was opening a lot of coaches' eyes on scout team, and now says he has that opportunity to take, I think, what's maybe the top backup spot or just honestly a spot on the team.
Yeah. And we knew things were going well because he was winning the Scout Team Player of the Week. He got a few of those, and you see the boards in there. He worked really hard. I think a lot of it for him was off-field stuff. I remember him telling me, like, he was taking notes on literally everything. Like, he'd follow Justin around, he'd follow Kareem around and take notes. And he said, like, I think the story's up on the website from, like, November, December. But he basically said he has the best of both worlds. Having somebody like Justin, who's that center fielder type, having somebody like Kareem, who's the box safety, you really get a chance to learn from 2 people who know a lot about how to play those 2 spots. I know in talking to him, he actually walked me through a bunch of their like defenses, that sort of stuff last year, just his role. He really was like, people say like you prepare every week like you're going to start. He knew everything. So like if you wanted to, you could go talk to him before like the Chargers game and be like, yeah, so what do they do? Like, how do you stop it? And he has everything. So like all the little details, all that sort of stuff. And that's what you want to see, because some guys, you go out there and you play fast. And so they said they saw it during like the end of season in practice that he was making plays. Again, that adds up. We saw the scout team awards. I'm curious what it's going to look like when we get to see him play every day in training camp, because he hasn't stood out so far, but I also haven't had like a single negative note. And for a free safety, a strong safety and free safety, I think I really like him deep personally. I think that can be a good thing, but that's definitely something you zero in training camp. And he got a bunch of opportunities, like you said, with no Brandon Jones or D2Y today. And
the Toyota chat, Henry, really wanted to know about Courtland Sutton. Yes. Is he going to be a mandatory minicamp next week? Matthew says he thinks they're still going to get rid of Court. Let's talk about Courtland, because we have an update on him. But before we do you have any other final things you want to throw out over practice today?
I've got a bunch.
Let's hit them so we can get a Court update.
Let's just really fly through. I had there was a great slant from Marvin Mims against Riley Moss. Came free, and actually Alex Singleton hit him at the end of the play.
Yep, he would have been blown up.
He would have been blown up, and Alex didn't blow him up, but he just kind of like,
I would hope not.
Exactly, but then Marvin was on the ground for a bit. Like it took him a little bit to let, and I don't really understand, because I think he just got scared. I don't know what it was, but yeah, that would have been a hospital ball from Zach Wilson. As sad as that is to say, those are all good. Jaleel, the speed, we talked about that. I brought up the Zach Allen, brought up the PJ Locke blitz and sack. Josh Reynolds had a nice catch over the middle.
Yeah.
Got good protection and just like nice and smooth. He gives you like a couple of those a day, and nothing has really stood out, and nothing that he's done really, but he definitely fits in. He isn't an issue.
Yeah, it was like a 15-yard catch from Stidham.
Yeah, and it was a blitz that the offensive line picked up perfectly. He had his running back in the flat, but just sat there. I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And then eventually came free over the middle. It's like, okay, you waited for it. It worked. You were right. I was wrong, as you'd expect. Again, a couple catches from Marvin Mims. Quinn Miners on one of these run plays. I mentioned there was a lot of running the football. I think that's why the fight kind of broke out later on. But there was one block on John Franklin Myers where he just opened up a big hole. It was like it would have been the tight end, and McGlinchey had the double team, and he just kind of has that backside like pin block, and he just takes him 3 yards downfield, and it's wide open. Let me make sure there's nothing else. A couple Yasmin sightings, which is going to be fun.
Especially in the red zone.
Dre's on Friday. We're going to be talking about him a lot. Read option. Just get you thinking, like, how much do you do that with Bo Nix? But that's probably not a question for today.
All right.
We can probably move.
Let's get to the question the Toyota chat wants to know. Courtland Sutton, not there. It seems like he is officially going to miss all of the voluntary part of the offseason program, which started in the middle of April, taken back through the middle of June. This week is the final week. And then next week is the last part of the offseason program. It's the only week that's mandatory. And so Courtland Sutton and Sean Payton apparently have a good relationship. Sean Payton has said a couple of times this offseason that he's talked to Courtland Sutton. Everything's good there. We got our final update before mandatory mini camp. Does Sean Payton expect Courtland Sutton to be there next week? Here's what Sean said today.
Yeah, I think he'll be here for mini camp. I mean, it's mandatory. And when I've been asked about Courtland, I'm going to say this, man, I just know his work ethic. I know the player. And, you know, there's a list of things that race through your mind this time in the offseason as a head coach. And respectfully when I say this to him, because he and I have talked, I think that'll work itself out. So I think he'll be here, yeah. But I don't know that for sure.
Is it a contract situation that was reported a few months or two ago?
Well, it's not that he doesn't like our new uniforms.
Okay.
That's great.
There we go.
What a way to just absolutely confirm the news that Courtland is 100% missing OTAs because of a contract situation. Certainly not because of the uniforms. I mean.
Yeah, no, I mean that wouldn't be it.
But the news here is obviously that Sean Payton, he said it's not 100% official. It's not like Courtland has told Sean that he expects or that he will be there. But Sean Payton expects Courtland to be there. And I think the first part of his answer was very telling. He's like, well, I mean, it is mandatory mini camp. It is mandatory to be there. And obviously, Sean wanted to make it very clear that that wasn't a threat to Courtland. But it is mandatory. And he talked about the CBA and how things have changed later in the press conference. He talked about how things have changed with players holding out, with this part being mandatory. Now players do get fined, and we're seeing it today. A couple of teams are holding their mandatory minicamps today. There's no CeeDee Lamb in Dallas. There's another player, Brandon Ayuk, is holding out to receivers who want more money and new contracts that are missing mandatory minicamp. So Sean expects Courtland to be there next week, but it isn't expect him to be here. It's not a yes, he absolutely will.
Yeah. No, I'd take that as it's like a football guy answer. It's like,
that's coach.
Do you expect him to be here? Like, yeah, we expect everybody to be here for mandatory. Like, I don't think it's all that much news. It'd be great if it happens though. We can only hope.
And Henry, Sean continues to say 2 weeks ago he said this, and then today he also said it. Like, it's going to work itself out. What's he talking about? Like, obviously the contract, but like when he says that, is he saying it's going to work itself out? As in, yeah, Courtland Sutton's going to show up because he's under contract. Is it, Courtland Sutton isn't going to show up because he's going to be traded? Or is it Courtland's going to show up because we're going to pay him the contract that he wants?
I think it's going to work itself out. And I'm just going to say that to shut everybody up. Because, like, you don't really, like, it really could mean anything.
Stay positive.
Exactly. I'm curious because you can rescind the fine, right? So if court doesn't show up, they can say like, "Hey, this is actually fine."
I think with the new CBA, you can't.
Okay,
you can't because you used to be able to. I think with this new, I could be wrong on that, but I do believe Chris Jones lost all of that money last year. It wasn't just like a threat that he's going to lose $1 million by missing actual games. He actually did lose that money.
Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, I wanted to figure this out today, but again, we were just so late getting here.
See, there's too many players holding out right now. Those are the stories that are popping up.
Exactly.
And so technically, right now, what Courtland Sutton's doing is not a holdout. It's when you miss mandatory things is when it becomes a holdout, and that would start in 1 week from today. And we're going to be at practice Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday for their mandatory minicamp next week.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah, hopefully the quarterbacks are better.
Yes.
That'd be really nice. Yep.
Yes, I hope so too. Any final thoughts on Court?
I really want to see him against Jaquan. I think Jaquan had his quietest day of camps today. But I've said it before, like every day I just get a little bit more tempted to play him on the boundary because whenever you put him on the field, good things happen. So if you can get another 25 snaps a game out of him by playing him on the boundary when you're not nickel, moving him inside nickel, that has to be really tempting. We've seen the size come up a couple times. It didn't come up today, but it would just be nice to see him go up against Courtland Sutton for a bit and just see what happens. Because again, with like week 1, you're playing DK Metcalf. And so there's a real chance that you just can't get away with playing Jaquan out there unless you really scheme around it. And I think there's just Courtland Sutton being there is good for everybody, not just for him or for Bo. It just gets you a better read on all this stuff because he's the best competition that these guys are going to get from any receiver.
I love that. I absolutely love that, Henry, especially when you're talking about big body receivers because Court's physical. Where Tim Patrick is tall and lengthy, Court is that physical type of receiver, especially with jump balls. So I love that. My final thing on Court is I want to hear from Court. We've heard from Sean Payton talk about Court. We've heard some reports from maybe Court's camp, the Broncos camp, about what's going on. We've heard from Marvin Mims say that he hasn't talked to Courtland. We've heard from some of Courtland's teammates. We have not heard from Courtland himself. And what I can tell you is stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned.
To us, the DNVR Broncos podcast, this week. Details to follow soon. So stay tuned to that. We got one super chat to hit from our friend Julian, who says, is it true that Zach Wilson is looking to be the starter? If true, then it could be a make or break year for him and the Broncos. It will decide his NFL future. Well, Julian, is it true that Zach Wilson is looking to be the starter? I'm sure he's looking to be the starter, but is it looking like he's going to be the starter? No. In fact, I think I can speak for both of us, Henry. It is very much looking like Zach Wilson is the third best quarterback on the team right now. And we talked about it in the first segment, second segment. If you missed that, tune back in for that full discussion. But I'm pretty much ready to say going into training camp, this is Jarrett Stidham versus Bo Nix for the starting quarterback job, and Zach Wilson's competing to make the team.
Yeah, but I think the big competition is for the backup job, to me. I think I would be shocked if Bo isn't the starting quarterback, and because of that, you want to give those guys similar opportunities. Like, you can't just be having, Stidham, you're playing with the ones half the time and twos half the time. Zach Wilson, you're playing with the threes or maybe the two. Like, you kind of need to put them on similar ground if you're going to actually have them compete, which you have to, because even though Stidham has looked better, again, like he was in this offense last year. Zach Wilson's been in this offense for a few weeks, and you also save $5 million if you choose Zach over Jarrett Stidham, which kind of balances things out in some ways.
Yeah, it's really true. So Bo still looking to be the Broncos starting quarterback. That's how it shakes out right now. Henry, this has been an awesome show. Tons of detail with what went on at Broncos practice. We thank you all so much for tuning in with us. If you're new to here, we do this 5 days a week at least. Typically go live at 11 a.m. unless the Broncos are doing something, whether it's practicing, press conferences, special events. Then we break it down after, just like we did today. So subscribe. Hit us with a thumbs up if you're tuning in today on the channel. Hit us with a 5-star review if you're listening. And make sure to also turn on automatic downloads for your podcast. I have them, and it's so nice. I mean, literally, when I push publish on our podcast, I get a little notification 5 minutes later on my phone saying the DNVR Broncos podcast is up, and then you can click on it and listen to it. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we're going to be live at 11 a.m. tomorrow. But later this week, as I have said, stay tuned.
Yes.
Because the court might be in session.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy. That'll do it. Have a terrific Tuesday.
We all silly like the mayor.